Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022, and we're live here on the YouTubes. We're doing the YouTube thing today, and this time I managed to get it right. I figured out how to put it up ahead of time, get it scheduled on YouTube. On my channel, it's not on the Ed Morrissey Show podcast channel yet, because for some reason it just really doesn't want to do that. And I'm not sure why. But yeah, it doesn't really want to do that. We're going to go ahead and pop this out on Twitter as well while we're here. I want to thank everybody for being with us today. And let's see if a supply guy over in the Cranky T-Rex .com/chatisar chat room is asking for the Twitter link. So I'll go ahead and pop that over there as well. And yeah, so I mean, this is going to be something else. We have dropped the, we got a couple of people watching right now. Jeff Dunnitz. How can the Senate say that an abortion is a woman's right when the Senate just confirmed a justice who doesn't know what a woman is? Yeah, it's amazing how Democrats suddenly remember what a woman is. And also about bodily autonomy after ordering all sorts of vaccine mandates. Now, I think you can make inconsistency arguments on both sides here. I'm not saying that you can't. However, yeah, we're going to talk a lot about the Supreme Court decision, but I do want to talk a little bit to start off with here about today's podcast. Today's podcast is great. We got Father Robert Sirico, who is a co-founder of Acton Institute. He co-founded it 32 years ago, in fact. That's at acton.org. He's got a new book out by Regnery. Now, this is a unit of Salem Media Groups, just the same as Hot Air is through Town Hall Media. But I like Regnery books, and I always enjoy interviewing Regnery authors. So anyway, the book is called The Economics of the Parables. And Father Robert Sirico walks us through 13 of the parables, plus some other passages in the Gospels and in Scriptures, New Testament Scriptures. I believe it's exclusively New Testament Scriptures, to explain how the parables teach us about the value of free market economics. Not that that was necessarily the point behind them. This is something that Father Sirico and I talk about quite a bit, is that, of course, there's a larger economy, so to speak, being discussed here, which is the economy of salvation, rather than economics. And if you think I'm being clever about the word economy, that is actually a theological term. If you study theology, you will hear about economy, and it has nothing to do with markets. It has to do with, yeah, Ed is live. I am live. And if you're watching me on YouTube, you should be able to see me live. Severe Cruise Conservative is asking if I am live or if I'm Memorex. And I'll just go ahead and say live on the YouTubies. By the way, you should be able to. I made sure I put the embed correctly into the show post today, so you should be able to be watching this at Hot Air. If you don't want to be on the YouTube site itself, you should be able to watch this on Hot Air. And so yeah, we are live. And by the way, there's a chat function on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, you can chat. I think you do have to have a login. I'm not sure about that. But you can chat over there. We do have that up. Jeff's over there. Jeff's also at crankytrex.blogspot.com. crankytrex.com/chatisar. I've already put the link up once in the chat. And Severe Conservative is I Am Live Ditto. So there you go. And again, we're doing a few things differently here. We are normally on Facebook Live. And we might go back to it because I'm not sure if this is the best platform for this. I think we were getting more viewership on the Facebook platform, but I figure it doesn't hurt to try these things out either. And people here suggested the YouTube. The only confusing thing is the description of your pre-recorded pod is on the details on this page, which is true. And I've been doing that all along, which is I want to get people to take a look at the pre-recorded podcast. So I'm describing that because we're also going to discuss the conversations that we were having in that pre-recorded podcast. So I've been doing that all along. If that's an issue, let me know. But usually I embed the live thing, if it's Facebook Live or this. Facebook for Dummies. Yeah, exactly. So the Father Sirico conversation was great, by the way. He's a lot of fun. And I think I've interviewed him at least a couple of times on Drew's show, which we kind of remembered after we got done recording this interview. Fine gentleman, is very, very engaging. Optimistically cynical. Guys, we didn't care when Trump armed Saudi Arabia, but trust me, we're principled people with a strong stance on life. Yeah. That's a sort of a non sequitur. The fact that we even produce arms, you could make that argument about. And in fact, often the Catholic Church will make that argument about it. The fact that we sell arms to anybody, including Europe, is an issue along those lines. There's a difference, though, between people selling weapons to people for their self-defense and, killing children in the womb. Yeah, that's, but yes. Supply Guy says, my YouTube login is a real name, which I'd prefer not to use so the Ministry of Truth can't find me so easily. Well, that's the reason why I've got both chat rooms up too, Supply Guy. So, you can do, over here, we armed Saudi Arabia versus Iran, Severe Conservative says. I'm a little bit more used to getting this sort of hypocrisy argument in terms of the death penalty, which I do oppose. I would say I'm moderately opposed, mostly in principle, based on the way it's applied and sort of the inconsistent nature of it. But yeah, that one, I'm a little bit more prepared to answer that one too, for that matter. But yeah, selling people defensive arms is not the same thing as aborting children in the womb. It just isn't. It's a completely different issue. And even if we're going to talk about the, theological, ecclesiological issues in regards to that, the church sees them as very different things too. It's very much worth noting, I've noted it a number of times on the blog, that there's only one act in the entire Catechism of the Catholic Church which results in immediate excommunication, latae sentiae, which means in the commission of the act, by the commission of the act. And that is abortion. Either procuring or facilitating an abortion is automatic, immediate excommunication. You don't even have to have an edict. You just can consider yourself excommunicated. Now, you can certainly seek forgiveness. You go through confession, go through some sort of penance. You work with your bishop or with a priest, because usually the bishop just hands that off to a priest. And you can deal with it. But is it excommunicating act? Whereas selling arms isn't. Even the death penalty isn't. And if you read the Catechism, there is still some very narrow room for prudential judgment on the death penalty. And I'd say it's so exceedingly narrow that basically it's been closed off. But it's not considered an excommunicative act to even to participate in a legal execution. So yeah. Nope. Would you object to aborting an Amalekite? I think you'd have to define Amalekite for me. I'm not sure what Amalekite is. So we sell arms to Saudi for ancient rabbis say life begins when the kids get a good job and move out of the house. Life begins when they move out of the house the second time. Jeff. At any rate, these are two very different things. And they involve really two very different principles, right? One of which is the sacramental nature of life from conception to natural death. And the other has to do with arms sales. Now, arms sales in and of themselves are not necessarily sinful. It just depends on what the arms are the use that the arms are being put to. I'm not saying that there's not moral implications in arms sales, because there certainly are. But it is not the same thing as aborting. A child from Amalek, God commanded the infants be slaughtered. Okay. I guess if we were in, Old Testament times, we could have that debate. Right? Nobody's ordering the infants to be slaughtered. Probably hard to do on, it's tricky. You can have multiple YouTube accounts. Probably hard to do on the fly while you're here now. Yeah. The death penalty is in the Old Testament. Yeah, I think there's references to it in the New Testament as well. I'm not going to say that there isn't. But that's one of the reasons why the church has always had sort of a, what's the best way to put this? A considered opinion on the death penalty is because it does appear in Scripture. So yeah. Optimistically cynical. It's either always wrong or it's not. Well, abortion, first off, doesn't involve killing infants, which is a whole different sort of morality. It also is in a situation. I mean, this is kind of a dumb argument, but okay. I guess I would like to see the reference in Scripture to what you're talking about. Because the most of the references I see in Scripture of slaughtering children have to do with it being evil, including the sacrifices to Moloch, which is probably the most analogous Scripture, Old Testament Scripture you can find to abortion, which is slaughtering children to appease gods. So, yep. Yes, I know. Optimistically cynical is being a troll, as Supply Guy says, but yeah, that's, yeah. Have a nice day, Optimistically Cynical. Thank you for stopping by. I am happy to engage with people on this. It's a live chat for a reason. I think it's more, certainly I'm not going to be unhappy with the ruling if it sticks at 5-3 or 6-3. I don't think it's going to go to 6-3 because I don't think Roberts is going to sign on to it. I've never been convinced that Roberts was going to sign on to overturning Roe. But I read through the opinion today. I didn't write an analysis of it. John's got something. It's either up now or it's coming up soon. Talking a little bit about what, actually, I think it just went up because it has to do with the Biden thing. Severe Cruz says, YouTube is better, to Bob Knox, who just joined us. Again, I think I want to get a good sense of this, right? So I want to go through today. We tried it on Thursday, but of course that was problematic. I couldn't figure out how to set this up and schedule it. So I had to start it off, with no notice. Today I was able to get it right. So this is the first really good test. I'm not seeing a ton of people showing up for it though. Ed disagrees with Ed and Dwayne, who says Roberts will be on board. Ed is correct. I think if he was going to be on board, you would have heard 6-3, right? Not 5-3. And and here's the big key for me, and I wrote about this today, is if Roberts was going to be on board, he'd be writing the opinion. And the reason why I think he'd be doing it is so that he could modulate the language and make it a little nicer. Or alternative 2, and I thought that this might really actually be the thing. If he was part of the concurrence in the majority, as Chief Justice, he could either write the opinion himself or he could assign it to whoever he wants to specifically. And I think he would have assigned it to Barrett, because I think he would have been looking at this politically and saying it's better if the female justice writes this rather than an old white guy like Samuel Alito, so to speak, right? So I think he's not on board. Because if he was on board, I think that Alito wouldn't have been writing this in the first place. He'd be writing a concurrence. Oh, and Bob Knox left. Well, hopefully Bob Knox comes back. I wrote something about the lies being told about the ruling. Don't forget, this isn't a ruling yet, right? It's a draft. And justices can change positions. The drafts can change. I think that the Supreme Court, I think John Roberts did confirm that this was an authentic draft of an opinion, but also warned we're not done yet. And nobody should take this as, fait accompli until they see what the actual published opinion is going to be on this. That being said, I don't think Roberts is coming along, and I think the fact that Alito is writing this means that old white guy is leftist and Roberts framing not constitutionalist. I know I'm being, and Severe knows this. I'm being glib. I'm being a little satirical here. But I think if Roberts was on board with this, he'd be writing it himself, or Barrett would be writing this. It wouldn't be Alito. Wouldn't be Thomas. I mean, maybe it'd be Gorsuch before Alito even. But I think that Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh and Barrett, actually, honestly, the reason why Alito is writing this is because he's the most senior justice among those concurring in the majority. And that's the tradition. That's how you know, right? That's one of those things. So he is the most senior justice among the five. So that tells me Roberts ain't coming along. Because if Roberts was coming along, this thing would still not be in draft 3 months later, right? It would become 6-3. Roberts would take it over, or he'd assign it to Barrett. And then Alito would simply write it as a concurrence. He would restructure it as a concurrence. Maybe the others want Alito to write, and Roberts agreed to let them. No, I mean, Alito gets to do it. And Roberts, I think, would not let Alito do it if he was on board. Alito's the most senior of the five, and I think it's pretty clear that that's the reason why he's got this. Actually, that's not true. I'm wrong about that. Wait a minute. No, because Alito came in after Thomas. So Thomas would actually have precedence. So I'm incorrect about that. Jeff says, one of the things I said in my post is that it was only a draft. I almost want to sing the Schoolhouse Rock bill. I'm only a draft. I'm only a draft. I gotta wait for the rest of the court to vote. Now, that's Schoolhouse Rock as opposed to, Schoolhouse Rock as done by Bill Clinton. Did it have a draft watermark like my Word documents? I didn't see any watermarks on it. And these were, this was looked like it was paper copies that were put into a PDF, that were scanned and put into a PDF form. So it isn't we're not seeing the original electronic version. So clearly somebody wanted their fingerprints off of this. Somebody must have remembered the Reality Winner situation. Do you guys remember the Reality Winner case? This was the woman who was working in as a contractor for, an intelligence agency, who decided to leak documents to try to make Trump look bad. And she sent them over to the Intercept, and the Intercept was stupid enough to publish them in their raw form, which were coded, which was coded, and they know exactly who it was that had given them the documents as a result. Yeah. Reality Winner, I think she did, yeah, and then she thought she had white privilege. She says, I'm white, I'm cute, I'm not going to get in any trouble. I think she's out, right? I think she only did like a year or two, and then she was out. Don't hear too much about Reality Winner these days. Severe says, I like the way the internet blamed a leftist who may be totally innocent. This is, I wrote this, I tweeted it out. Let's not Ellery Queen this thing. We don't know who it was that did this. We can speculate all day long. But, the Marshal of the Supreme Court has the authority to conduct the interview. And the Marshal of the Supreme Court can bring in the FBI to help out, which I suspect is going to be the very first move that they make. Because, frankly, I don't know that the Marshal of the Supreme Court has a whole lot of resources for this type of thing. And somebody asked me, well, it's a different branch, right? Because FBI is executive branch and judiciary is a different branch. But I don't think there's as much tension between the executive and the judiciary in those terms as there is with the executive and the legislative, especially last, 20 years or so since, 25 years. So I don't necessarily think that that there's a big issue with having the FBI come in and at least provide some resources for this investigation. All right, Jeff Dunnett says, how long do you think it will take for them to figure out the person who did it? And says, I don't know. I mean, if this was a one and done and the person keeps his mouth shut, his or her mouth shut, they may never be able to figure it out. Josh Gerstein was smart enough to take a printout and scan the printout and remove any identifying markers. I did notice that when I was going through this. So we're not talking about an intercept level, stupid here that's going to identify a source. And Jeff wants to know if the marshal's last name is Dillon. Severe Cruz Conservative says, you can't say Marshal of the Supreme Court without laughing at Louise Mensch. I was thinking about that today too, and I almost put this in there, and I thought it's just too cheap a shot. It'd be fun, but it's just too cheap a shot to say, finally, the U.S., the Marshal of the Supreme Court there's actually a legitimate story about the Marshal of the Supreme Court. I don't know who the Marshal of the Supreme Court is, by the way. Maybe somebody can pull up the name, but I'm pretty sure it's not Dillon. All right. So my issue here is not really the decision. I think the decision is, if this is the decision, if this is the eventual decision, I think it's well thought out. It's a little bit strident, but I think it's going to have to be in order to answer for the stare decisis issues that will and challenges that will come up. Not legal challenges, but of course rhetorical challenges, political challenges. Alito has to make the case that Roe was a badly decided decision, that Casey was badly decided on top of that. But here's the thing. I think the biggest issue here is the leak itself. I actually think that even with all the hysterics that you're seeing today, the writing was on the wall here for Roe just by the fact that the Supreme Court took this case. Right? You had 4 justices already set up to overturn Roe. Plus you had John Roberts basically daring people to bring a case that directly implicates Roe, because his comment a couple of years ago was that, well, people keep nibbling on the edges, so we don't get a chance to we have to leave the precedent in place because nobody's challenging the precedent. We need a case that challenges the precedent if people want to discuss it. So here comes Dobbs. And Severe Cruz Conservative, just cited my least liked NFL player ever, Jack Tatum. And yes, I think he would agree that there's no such thing as a cheap shot. I was watching the game with Darryl Stanley. And, that was a different era of football. But even with that, anyway, that's a whole different topic. So the leak is one thing. Politically speaking, though, I don't think that this makes a ton of difference. I really don't think this makes a ton of difference. I think what you're going to see here is the fact that this has mostly been baked into the cake. And I think when it becomes clear that this doesn't actually outlaw anything, all it does is vacate the constitutional right basis, and that state laws are now going to come into play. I think that's going to have a modulating effect, not a moderating effect, but at least a modulating effect on the passions this spring. But I actually do think that in the longer run, it's going to have a moderating effect on both parties. It's very easy to have this thing be framed as, no abortions at all versus abortions until the baby can get a social security number. Because that's kind of where the parties are at right now. But once you start having to legislate this, you're going to have to deal with a public where maybe 62% support abortion for adults within the first trimester, and largely oppose it after that. and in any other circumstances, right? So if Democrats or if Republicans had taken that position, which is kind of similar to where Europe's at on this thing, I suspect that they'd be in maybe a better political position at this point in time. I think the fact that this thing's been in the courts has really incentivized both sides to absolutist positions. And when it gets into actual legislating for this thing, and I mean even in states where, you've got a lot of, Republican voters, red states, you're going to have legislatures that are going to have to reflect what the will of that electorate is. Now, I think in some of these red states, the will of the electorate is going to be to basically outlaw it except in cases of rape or incest, which are surpassingly small instances. Here we go with Ed looking for centrism. I'm not saying that I'm looking for centrism. I'm actually more of an abortion absolutist. I don't think it should be done ever, period. But what I'm saying is the outcome of this in an electorate where 60-something% of the electorate support abortion for the first trimester, or at least to the heartbeat, for adults, not for kids, with either for adults or with parental notification, you're going to get laws that reflect that. And I think that in other states where suddenly this is going to become a more complicated issue, the idea that you're going to have a popular support for abortion through the 9th month, I think, is a fantasy. Red states and blue states were passing laws that were fantasies based on the idea that the Supreme Court had more or less just Bigfooted the whole thing. Well, now the Supreme Court is unbigfooting this thing. And I think what's going to happen is liberal states are going to have more liberal laws. Conservative states are going to have more conservative laws. But I think what you're going to wind up with is, in a large number of states, sort of the European status quo. The decision, this is a good question. Does the decision marginally help Democrats in the fall? Create Dem energy where there was very little? No, and I don't think there's going to be more money for races either. I think Josh Kraushaar was making this point on Twitter, which is that there's a gender gap in the generic ballot of something like 30 points. It wasn't the entire gender gap. There was a specific demographic he was looking at. Now I can't remember what the demographic was, but I don't think it can get a whole lot wider than that. I don't think that this, I think by the time this, if this was, I know the Supreme Court isn't set up this way, but if this was a decision that rolled out in late September, mid-September, when early voting started up, or just before it, I might be convinced of that. But I think having this thing come out in early May, and then maybe just be reinforced in late June when they actually publish this. Actually, I'm wondering if they're going to publish the decision more quickly now. I think that they were probably waiting to have more debates, but now that this thing's out, I would not be surprised within the next couple of weeks they just publish a decision, get this thing. White suburban women, that was what it was. White suburban women, thanks. And Severe Cruz Conservative says, updated me on this. So I don't think that it's going to be much of an impact at all. Again, because I think a lot of this is baked into the cake. I mean, the Dobbs case has been clocking along now for more than a year in the appellate courts. We knew it was coming up now. We've already had the oral arguments. And again, I think most people figured, well, some people, I think that there was a lot of pessimism on the left about how this court was going to rule. And so I think some of this outrage is performative. It was this, they were going to react this way when it came out. And if this is the decision, they would have had the same reaction. They just would have had it in late June rather than early May. And I think that the difference of the several weeks means that the outrage exhaustion is going to arrive sooner and have less impact on the midterms. I think when you get down to when people are voting, there will be a few activists that really push this, but I think most people are going to be looking at what's touching their lives every single day. And it's not abortion. What's touching their lives every single day is crime, is inflation, is generalized economics, right? Those are the types of things that are going to impact votes, and none of those things benefit Democrats. Chef Jack Cruz says the delay in these things is often the dissents. That might include Roberts and the other three still writing them. Yeah, the dissents weren't part of that package. That was just a draft of Alito's thing. It was 98 pages, by the way. And it is very well worth reading. They put barriers up at the Supreme Court over the weekend. Do you think it had advance notice of the link? Yeah, I mean, not that there's a grand conspiracy behind this, but typically, right? I mean, this was published on Monday evening. My guess is that this has been floated out to a couple other news organizations, because the Wall Street Journal had a really curious editorial on I believe it was on Friday, talking about John Roberts maybe trying to woo Kavanaugh and Barrett away from a majority that would overturn Roe. It was sort of out of nowhere. John Sexton had a couple of other instances. He was talking about this last night on his Twitter thread. It was really good. And I remembered when that came up, and I was thinking, are they just basically remembering Obamacare and thinking that Roberts is going to do this? My guess is that this thing got floated around, and other news agencies may have decided not to publish it because it would be just too damaging to the Supreme Court, and Politico made a different decision. But typically when that happens, what the process is to contact the court and ask, hey, I've got this thing. Is this legitimate? I mean, if you're a reporter, you're going to do that. You're going to try to at least follow up. Ask people for comment, right? And so if they started getting those types of questions on Thursday or Friday, they knew it was coming out. The only thing I would say is I'd be surprised. In that case, I'm surprised that Politico released it on Monday night rather than say Monday afternoon, early afternoon. So yeah, the reporter is probably reaching out for comment, so everybody gets tipped off in those cases. So yeah. Ed has more faith in other news orgs than I do. I think I'm not the only person who's speculating that this got shopped around a little bit before Gerstein decided to publish it. And I think that was a bad decision. It's not as bad as the dossier, right? BuzzFeed and CNN publishing the dossier. I mean, this is a little bit more on the level, and it's certainly a whole lot less slanderous to a particular person. I mean, this is still a pretty dicey moral call, in my opinion. Especially when you realize that the process isn't finished until the opinion gets published. Gerstein is considered a court expert. I actually enjoyed Josh Gerstein's reporting. He's very good. He's very knowledgeable. He's a beat reporter who really knows his beat. It's like Christopher Rugaber, right? I was just making this point on Twitter about Rugaber too. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with every take that Rugaber has on economic data, but I do know that Rugaber is good at reporting economic data, right? And he emphasizes different things than I would emphasize sometimes. He has a different analysis than I would have on different times, but he's not dishonest and he knows the data. And so I've relied on his reporting in the past, and I've never gotten burned by relying on Rugaber's reporting. Same thing with Gerstein. I've never been burned by relying on Gerstein's reporting. He's knowledgeable. It doesn't mean every decision he makes is great, right? But yeah. Oh, better late than never. My cousin Mike is here. Yay! He's at the hotel. Well, welcome. Lock the door, Mike. There are unfettered conversations going on here. We're consuming them, as Fritz Hollings would say. It's true. It's true. Andrew and I, by the way, talk about the disinformation thing in the podcast, and we have a lot of fun with the disinformation thing. You're definitely going to want to go through that. We talk about some of the other, issues of the day. But I do think that you're really going to enjoy the Father Robert Sirico. Any other questions? Any other questions on anything else? I mean, I was really expecting this really to be all about the Supreme Court today and all about the Dobbs and Roe, because it's just, we've been mostly focused on that. There's some developments on on Russia and Ukraine too. Apparently 2 weeks ago, Pope Francis was talking to an Italian newspaper today and said that Viktor Orban told him that the war would be over by May 9th. Francis talked to the paper this morning, but 2 weeks ago, Orban told him, Orban being the Prime Minister of Hungary, told him that Putin had told him that they had a precise plan in place and that the war would be over by May 9th. I'd say that that ain't working out well for Vladimir Putin. Now they're expecting him to declare all-out war in Ukraine, not just a special military operation on May 9th, which is Victory Day in the, I almost said the USSR in Russia. It's a Victory Day. That's the day that Nazi Germany formally surrendered to the Soviets, which the other allies, the UK and the US and France too, I suppose, forced Nazis to formally surrender to Russia or the Soviet Union as well as to them. They surrendered to us on May 7th. They surrendered to the Russians on May 9th. So that's the reason why May 9th is Victory Day for them. Now Ukrainian intelligence thinks that they'll be fighting until September before they run out of resources to do it. But, Ed, here's a link where Carol Platt-Liebau says she's shadow banned and tagged to you, as you recall. You had to straighten them out about the throttling of accounts. Yeah, Carol and I have discussed this too. We're both, in the Salem world, and it's come up before. We've talked about this. I don't know what the specific mechanism is. I will tell you this about the throttling of accounts. For the first several years that I was on Twitter, my follower growth was more or less exponential, right? I'm not saying that it's huge. I'm just saying that it was more or less exponential. The more followers I had, the more my number would increase, because it's sort of an exponential network sort of thing. So the more people who are following you, the more people will see your tweets, the more people will react to your tweets. Their followers will see you and they'll follow you, that sort of thing. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's sort of a trend, right? And I got up to about, 67,000, 68,000 followers, which is great. I'm fine with that, And then, of course, a lot of those were bots. And in the great bot, in the great bot wipeout, was a couple of years ago. I think it was pre-pandemic. They had the great bot wipeout. I lost like 4,000 or 5,000 accounts. And I'm fine. If those are all bots, I'm fine with that. And again, I wasn't necessarily obsessing over this. So I'm down to around 62,000 or so. And then it just stayed there. It just stayed flat, right? And didn't grow at all. It just stayed almost right on that number. It was just really in a range. It's sort of, because people leave Twitter too and accounts get closed. So it sort of actually trended downward. And I've talked to Adam Baldwin, who's often talked about throttling and shadow banning. And I can't tell you that there was anything specific that was going on, but it seemed to me that the reach of my tweets apparently had changed for some reason. And the follower thing was really the only indirect measurement I had. Now, I didn't complain about it because, again, it's whatever. People follow me, that's great. If people don't want to follow me, I'm fine with that too. I'm not in there doing things that will, I don't have follower boosting strategies for my Twitter account. But in the last 7 days, 8 days really, the last 8 days since Elon Musk completed the sale of Twitter, I have had my account go up 400. That is by far and away the fastest it's gone in the last few years. And the fact that it's even gone up a significant amount is a change, right? Now, what's the reason for that? Well, some people say, more conservatives are coming back to Twitter. Okay. I'm not sure why they would find me immediately, but okay, that's certainly a possibility. But it's not like they all came back at once. What I'm seeing is sort of the same exponential-ish growth, the organic growth that I saw prior to a few years ago on this account. And I suspect that there was a strategy to hold that down somehow, to hold down the reach of the tweets or to interfere with the natural growth in followers one way or the other. I think that the dials had me down. Okay. Again, I wasn't going to go out and seek justice for this. I just think it's very curious. And I think the fact that a whole lot of other conservative accounts are experiencing the exact same thing and kind of on the same scale, right? I mean, you hear, I think, Hugh went up like 4,000 or something. I forget what it was, but he's got a lot more followers than I've got. So it makes sense because all of a sudden his tweets are going to have more reach if they're not being throttled. Somehow something was being throttled. Somebody had their finger on the scale. And I think now that new management may be coming in really shortly, the people who were doing that don't want to have their fingerprints on that process anymore. And they have turned the dials back to zero, right? Back to straight up. That's my guess. I'm waiting to hear, because eventually, this was a publicly traded company. Musk is going to get all of the internal communications for this. I'm very curious to see what the actual answer to this was. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to in the Musk era. All right. Severe Cruz Conservative asks, did you see the Taylor Lawrence and Drudge story? I did. I think that she's just not a very, I don't think she's a very honest broker. Let's just put it that way. And I think that the fact that the Washington Post hired her in the first place is a really telling indicator about her, about them, rather, I should say. I was at 14K, went down to 12K, and went up about 200 in the past week. Again, so I mean, again, it's this sort of progression that we were normally on. It's sort of this organic growth. Now I have my notifications turned on, so I don't think I see every follower. I think it misses some of those in that notifications thing, but I do see some of them, and a couple of them have been bots. A couple of them have been. I think, I don't know if you call it porn bots or dating site bots. A couple of them have been that way. Most of them, though, seem to be regular users. So I'm not seeing a flood of bots back into this. I think we're going to wrap things up here in just a minute. I want to thank everybody for being with us. I think on Thursday, we'll go back to the Facebook platform. I'm not sure what the issue is on YouTube, but I just think that there's more people waiting for this on Facebook and are keyed into I actually kind of like the YouTube format better. The YouTube format's easier to use. But we'll see. Right now, I'd say plan on it being back on Facebook on Thursday. And Severe Cruz Conservative says, I have 310 followers. I can move markets. Well, you probably can. Just depends on which followers you've got. So, there's ways that you can go out and engage people and try to get more followers. I should probably do more of that, but I'm not gonna. Just don't care that much. I just find it interesting. So, all right. So we're back on Thursday. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. I think on the Facebook platform. Keep your eyes open. I just don't see a lot of concurrent views. We were seeing more on Facebook than we did on Twitter and on YouTube. I really do like the YouTube better, but I guess it doesn't have the same pull, and probably because everything on there is live now. So there's probably more competition for live on that platform. It's fine. Let's do Facebook again, see where we're at. We'll just have fun with it. I just want to have fun with you guys. So that's my thing. Speaking of having fun, tomorrow, VIP Gold Chat with Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com. That's at 1:30 Eastern Time. 12:30 Central, 10:30 a.m. on the left coast. Be sure to tune in for that. Be a VIP Gold member. Then you get to go to the VIP Gold chats. And by the way, Julio Rosas has his book out. Fiery is out, so be sure to check that out as well. I've got to get him lined up. Severe Cruise Conservative. Ed bowing to reality. Well, again, the idea is to find just the most effective platform. And even though I like the ease of use of YouTube's live broadcast a little bit better, Facebook just seems to have a better connected platform to the users. So, and I will still embed, though, the post on the Hot Air show post so that people can watch it even if they're not on Facebook. So you can always go to Hot Air to watch it there. All right, let's play a little walking music. Thank everybody for being here. And there we go. Over on the crankytrex.com/chatasar chat room, we got Jeff Dunnitz from lidblog.com. I'll be interviewing him for a podcast on Thursday. Severe Cruise Conservative from Coolidge Foundation, coolidgefoundation.org. coolidgefoundation.org. Be sure to be there. Basically it's Jeff and Severe over on the YouTube side, but we also had Mike Morrissey, my cousin Mike, with us. Always great to have my cousin Mike with us. We got 4 likes over there, but it doesn't allow me to pop them up so I can see who they were. Thank you for your likes. If you haven't done a like over there, that'd be really nice. Optimistically Cynical was with us. And it's an interesting conversation with Optimistically Cynical. Until Thursday, when we go back to the Facebook platform, have yourselves a great week, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll talk to you later, folks.